Nation in Conversation, in proud partnership with Senves, Bayer, Engen, Nedbank, AFGRI, Grain SA and John Deere, in association with Hinterland and Isuzu.
Ladies and gentlemen, very welcome to another panel discussion of Nation in Conversation. Today we're looking at the reviving of the Platteland, and this is one of the more complex panel conversations because there are quite a few impinging factors. If I could just run through a few of them, I mean we've got climatic conditions. If you're looking up at the Northern Cape, we've got farmers that haven't had rain for 6 years. We've got in the western areas, the rain keeps coming later. Grain production is becoming increasingly complex. We've got governance issues in small towns. We've got migration issues in the Eastern Cape. We've got the lack of economic opportunities sees the migration of South Africans to the Western Cape. We've got social issues. So a very complex situation that we're going to try and unpack today with a very esteemed panel who I'll quickly want to introduce. From the extreme right, Mr. Vusi Kanyile. He's the executive chairperson of Tebe Investment Corporation. He's also an award-winning cattle farmer, farms close to Amersfoort in Mpumalanga. Welcome, sir. Next to him, Mr. Mohammed Baba, Director for the In Transformation Initiative. Welcome with us today. Mr. Rikwir White, Head of Economics and Trade at Agri SA. Theo Venter needs no introduction. He's a hardy favorite on these panel conversations, political analyst, Northwest University, and the Leona Archery, former Acting Director General at the Department of Land Reform. Leona, let me start with you. Why should we worry about small towns?
Well, I think small towns, small villages, and your communal areas of the country are areas that we must worry about because more than 17 million people still reside in these areas. These are areas, I believe, with significant economic potential, which we've not yet been able to exploit. And more than that, I think that the issue of rural-urban migration is seriously upon us as South Africa and many parts of the world. It's said that by 2030, more than 70% of our people will have moved to the urban centers. Now, the question is, can the infrastructure in our urban centers actually manage that? So how do we make sure that the small towns, the communal areas are developed to their fullest potential so that people actually are able to make informed choices of where they want to spend their lives, where they want to conduct economic activity? So for me, I think the Platteland, as it's so called, is very critical for us to focus on for development.
Thank you, Leonie. I just want to move over to you, Theo. So one of the reasons why we have a migration out of the Platteland areas is governance. So politically, how did we lose our way in the Platteland?
It's one of the reasons, but there's also, I would say, a larger demographic pattern that's emerging. I know there's no such a word as townification. In Afrikaans, we would call it verdorping rather than verstedelijking. In other words, there are two phases from people moving from the rural areas into towns, bigger towns, and then cities. In the case of Potchefstroom, when I was a final year student, the last Jewish family left Potchefstroom, not to go back to Israel, but to move to Johannesburg. And that void created by them was then filled in by other people, especially the Indian commercial kind of guys moved in. And now it seems to me they are moving to the cities because they made good money. The children all went to university. And now we see the Somalians, the Ethiopians taking that vacuum. So there's a constant process happening. And in 1994, actually 1996, the white paper on local government created a new system. And I think if there's one system in this new dispensation that's not working, then it is local government. Because local government used to have a system where the leadership in town, the mayor, usually appointed for a year, maybe he was a teacher or a schoolmaster or a medical doctor or a dentist or something. So the mayorship was like one of the things he did in his civic responsibility. What we've done in the white paper on local government, we made those positions permanent. And we created a new system where almost professional politicians are now running our towns. The ANC even realizes that. You'll see in their documents they talk about the so-called politicization or how politicians only have one job, and that's politics. And if they lose that job, then you'll see the big fights in town. KZN is an example, even in the Northwest. To be in politics or to lose your job as a permanent politician, you'll see the phrase used by them, careerism, which is like a cancer in local government. Therefore, the linkage between community and its leadership at the local level has been broken up. And that, I think, is a big problem. Therefore, I've played a role as facilitator in many towns. Klerksdorp, Hartbeesfontein, Zeerust, Potchefstroom, all over the Northwest. At first, when we moved into this new system, there was this very strong linkage between community and how the communities are being governed. And I think over time that is lost. Nowadays, politicians at the local level are basically seen as crooks. That's really the perception at the town, and that's part of the demise of local government. So if you now want to see the mayor, you must make an appointment. If you get an appointment, you will have a discussion and then nothing happens. So that responsiveness is gone. And I think that must be a serious concern for government, how to make governments work. Just a last point. Out of 253 local governments outside the metros, we have approximately 40 that are really sustainable. That's a worrying factor.
That's frightening. Mohammed, I just want to jump straight to you. How did we get here, and how are we going to get out of this problem?
Okay, so I see reference has been made to the white paper. Coincidentally, I was one of the co-authors of that. The solutions we have now are political solutions, and they were implemented and thought of at a particular stage in our history to try and solve things politically. What we made grave errors, one of which was that we did not look at our administrative capacity to back the political ambition. And to tell you that the situation is dire is an understatement. We must face the reality, and then that will give us the opportunities, and we'll be then able to view the opportunities. Let me give you some statistics to give you an idea. These are 2015 statistics, and they're getting worse. We have 273 municipalities if you take the districts into account. In that, we have 262 engineers in 9 metros. So throughout the country, we have 390 engineers in 273 municipalities, but they're not evenly divided. You have 262 in metros, that's in 9 metros, 108 in locals, and 20 in districts. In metros alone, there's 0.12 per 10,000 people serviced by engineers. And this is the core of a municipality. So in addition to what, I may not agree with everything you're saying, sir, but by and large, yes. Where socioeconomic conditions are bad, politics becomes about putting bread on the table. And the contestation becomes that much worse. It's no longer a civic service. So careerism does come in. But my main concern is the administrative capacity. So clearly there are plans to reconfigure government and to see whether the system we brought about is able to create the machinery to deliver. And right now it is true, it's not. There's just 2 or 3 factors. The other factor is that there is a trust deficit between politician and community. Firstly, within racial, but even cross-racial. And that is a plea. Perhaps we now have an opportunity to start looking at social cohesion again. We're all in this plane together, and if it falls, we're all going to fall together. And I hope that there is a political climate now to strengthen that the social cohesion, because I think there's a growing maturity and realization that there's no us in them anymore. We're in it together. The third reason is that in many of the municipalities where the demarcations were done, there are no nodal areas. So there is no economic activity. So we drew political boundaries on the assumption that the local economy would contribute to the municipality. But the political boundaries are not conducive or are not aligned to migration. So it's not dynamic and vibrant enough.
Just quickly.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what he's saying, that if you take two towns, one is Parys and Guade. I'm thinking of Parys because Esmagashule is in my mind all the time. But the other one, Harry Smith, Guade has got R1 billion debt. How is it possible for a small little town next to the Vaal River to accrue that kind of debt? Or Harry Smith, R3 billion, with a lot of big companies settled in that town. It's not only the reconfiguration of local government, we have to seriously look at the funding model, because that is not working.
But talking about the funding model, and you spoke about economic sustainability, and Mr. Barber, you were referring to the funding and where the money comes from. Requir, how do we get the bright, constructive people back into our communities, and how do we keep the money in our small towns? I mean, if you look at the chain stores in many of our small towns, I mean, that money goes back to head office in Johannesburg. How do we keep the money and the wealth and the people in our small communities?
I think the starting point is for these small towns to start developing a strategy, because I think there's no one solution to this problem. And we can have lots of ideas, but there needs to be some kind of a strategy where the community comes together and say, how can we work together on this as a broader strategy, and how are we going to implement that? I think part of the issue is also governance, trying to stimulate the economy, keeping money in that closed type of system. You need to attract investment. So that's part of it, setting up a conducive environment, but it starts with the community there actually developing some kind of a plan, because without a plan, we can have lots of ideas, but we're not going to get anywhere. So I think the starting point for this would be at a local level to have some type of a plan and linking that up with broader initiatives.
But just give us an example. Just give us I mean, you do a lot of work with solar energy up in the Northern Cape. I mean, would that be something to look at?
I think that's part of it. So the thought is, what's the economic, we touched on it, what's the economic driver of these towns? So you need a diversification of activity. I think that what might have happened, you have historically a town that's based on, for example, mining. The mine closes down, what happens to that town? The whole town kind of closes off. So we need to have a strategy of more diversification and not being so dependent on a single type of activity. And solar energy is an example, and it's part of the bigger wave of more going towards the green economy, and leveraging that and investing in green economy, generating your own electricity within a specific region. Especially it ties on to the bigger issue of our electricity crisis. So I think there's opportunities there to if we can leverage those types of investments and communities to work together and create their own energy. There's opportunity.
But then you need the governance where Eskom allows the farmers to sell back into the grid. Mr. Kanyili, just to come to you, you're a businessman from Johannesburg. You've diversified your business into Amersfoort in Mpumalanga. You've running an award-winning beef operation. You've partnered with a local farmer to put up a piggery. How do you go about building an inclusive farming business in a traditional agricultural area such as Amersfoort?
Well, I have been involved with the community of Amersfoort in the last 15 years as a farmer. And I have observed over the years that the farmers, the neighboring farmers, have really improved their productivity and their economic well-being. I have seen very clear evidence of that. But when I look around beyond the farmer and look at the lot of the people who live on the farms, people who work on those farms, I cannot say their lot has improved proportionately. And I think then this is where the challenge is. But I came across some statistics recently which indicate that farming communities have been shedding jobs. I think since about the 1970s, so it's not something since 94, since the 1970s, something like 1 million jobs have been lost for various reasons. And that has contributed to the progressive growth of unemployment and subsequently poverty in these farming areas. I've further observed that when it comes to schooling facilities, they are either rudimentary, that is now on farms themselves, not talking about the towns, but actual farms. They're either rudimentary or non-existent. Preschool schooling facilities do not exist at all. Healthcare facilities, even for emergency, medical emergency, do not exist. So it is therefore this challenge that faces one as a farmer in the Platteland, that you see the prospect for growing your farming operations if you invest correctly and manage it right, but at the same time, what impact are we having on those farming communities that live on the farm? I think then for me, this is really the challenge. I think it is for that reason that African Farms has established a development foundation to begin to integrate the commercial, the economic development of the farm with the well-being of the local communities, be they workers or people who are dwellers on the farm.
Mr. Kanyile, as a commercial farmer yourself, do you think that commercial farmers, commercial agriculture has no other choice but to get involved in their communities?
It is my philosophy in life and as well as philosophy in business that we've got to be lifting our communities as we build our businesses. Otherwise, our businesses are not sustainable.
Absolutely. Leonie, coming back to you, Mr. Kanyile was talking about agriculture, and one sees the enormous impact that it makes when an astute businessman like him comes to a small town, invests in agriculture. What are those catalytic economic opportunities that we should be looking at in small towns? I mean, how do we create these economic opportunities? You go to a place like Kulini, and you drive through the small town like that. I mean, you wonder what on earth one could do here to get people to live productive lives.
I think, let me just go back a step. I think government has carried out several studies across the country to try to identify what are those catalytic things or activities that can be carried out in small towns, in villages, in communal areas. CSIR being one of those institutions. And through them, they identified what they refer to as local economic gateways. And I think Requir was trying to also speak on some of those issues. What are your local economic gateways? What are your district economic gateways? But I think the important thing is to find that one thing. And you find that throughout the world, villages, towns have been built sometimes on just one commodity. In terms of agriculture. If one looked at an example of South Korea, for example, they took a simple thing as a fruit of a persimmon and were able to build an entire industry around that particular fruit. Now, let me go back a step to saying that the challenge I think we have is that we have the plans and they developed at a government level, but we do not begin to own it. And that's what I liked about what Requir was saying. How do we make sure that in the small towns, in the villages, we have inclusive ownership of the plan that we want to drive? How do we make sure that it benefits everyone collectively and just not one sector of a community? And I think that is going to be critical if we want to change around a town. So in coming up with those plans, they have to be integrated. You cannot look at economy without looking at the basic needs of people in the surrounding area. And the comment, Vusi, you make around lift as we rise, basically, right? Even as a commercial farmer is developing and improving, it means that the community around should also be benefiting and improving. And I think that when you talk about holistic development, education becomes critical, basic service access becomes critical, and you begin then to create economic bases through enterprise development linked to that catalytic item that you found that can drive your economy in that particular space.
I want to come back to Vusi in a minute about what African farms are doing to uplift people. But Theo, do you feel, I mean, if just your general feeling, having been involved in small town communities, are we first recognizing the resources that already exist in these small towns, and are we actually harnessing them effectively to generate new economic activity?
Two things. If I look at building statistics in general, it seems to me, despite all the good plans government has made, everybody wants a simple solution for small towns. So the issue is, let's build a mall, even if it's a small town. But malls are complicated things, and they don't work in small towns. So that one is not working. The problem with local government, back to the white paper and the previous discussion, if you look at government, you'll see there's a kind of a hierarchy how people are moving. You enter government at local government, you get yourself better educated, you move to province. Once you've received some promotion there, you move to national. So eventually, local government are stuck with a administrative capacity that is not very satisfactory, to say the least. And if you look at development and developmental projects, at the lowest level, you need the best administrators, and that we don't have. We have them where we don't need them. We need them down here to harness those things. We need, I can mention several in the Northwest and the Free State, where people that should manage local economic development don't have a clue of what they should do. But if they have one conference a year or something like that, they can tick a box and they said, we've done it. But I personally think that the establishment of a farming community, typically around small towns, is part of the solution of how the integration and how the discussion between farms and farm owners and farming organizations interact with the community. But that interaction isn't working because we don't have bridge builders in society. Bridge builders are those guys that have the ability to walk from where they're living into the township, and guys from the township to town, and for them to have a meeting of minds. The moment that happens, and there's several good examples. Kulini is one for them at the moment, due to that trauma they experienced a year or two ago.
With the Dominee.
The Dominee. Suddenly there's a skoonmaak, there's a painting thing. Northwest, where's the guys from Lichtenburg? There's Johan. They played a big role in that. Suddenly, then, like old Mr. T of the old story said, a plan comes together.
But I mean, you're talking about capacity at local government level. Maybe not in government, but I mean, you have the farming community. I know farmers are supposed to be looking at the bottom line and they're business people, but you have superb management expertise. I mean, we saw it in Harry Smith, where a farmer sorted out a water problem that had been struggling for years with. Within a space of afternoon, he replaced the pump and got everything going.
But you know what? The black community, the old name for that township was 42nd Hill, I think it's called something else now. They approached the guy, and he then corrected the stuff. Now there's legitimacy in the action.
Sure.
Because it is not like it's from the top down, it's the community talking to each other.
It's the bridge builders.
Yeah.
Mr. Kanyili, give us an example of how African farming operates in the Amersfoort community. How you, as a commercial farmer, make your presence felt in the community at large.
Well, the approach we took right from the beginning was really to say, that was well before the times of the minimum wage, was to say, the people who work for this company, this farming company, have got to take pride in what they do. They must be able to say, we are getting paid better than we would get elsewhere. And therefore, we have a stake in the success of this operation. So begin to align the interest of the worker with the interest of the farmer. And the financial incentives are part of that. That is one thing. But we've also observed in the 15 years that young people who leave school, they're literally roaming through the farms, not getting absorbed into the farming system, into the agricultural production system? No, into the social system of those communities. And we really are saying there is need to have programs that are going to be the bridges for this youth to get into the workplace. Let young people be able to see themselves develop, to aspire to say, I can enter at this low level, but because of this training program, in 5 years' time, I can be a supervisor. In 10 years' time, I might have a skill with a certificate that I can take anywhere, which gives me mobility as a worker. And therefore, we really need to take farming out of the doldrums into the future as an enlightened work environment and employment environment that practices the best employment practices. But
sorry?
I've talked about the workers. It's for people who have got the rights to remain and stay on those farms. They might or might not be working on those farms. They've got patches of land which grow lilies, occasionally potatoes that still starch. We need programs that are going to assist people on their existing portions of land, of the farm, to be able to grow vegetables and begin to improve their own quality of life. If they're successful, and if the intervention initiatives are successful, they can even begin to supply the local market.
Mr. Robert, just on that topic, what is being done to be at government level that you know about to facilitate all of this? I mean, are there new is there a new awareness that what Mr. Kanyile is speaking about is an absolute matter of urgency, that we need to get it implemented?
With your permission, can I discuss it both at a macro level?
Yeah, sure.
And then I think let's try and zoom in some of the practical things we can do at a town level. At a macro level, the last 10 years was characterized by a very, very deteriorating and bad relationship between government and the private sector. Fortunately, in the last few months, we're beginning to see the burgeoning of a realization that government can't do it alone without business, and there's a growing degree of trust. So I think we need to take advantage of this trajectory even at a local level. I know of initiatives where, led by Johan van Zyl of Toyota, who has taken something over 20 sectors to align the private sector's plans with the government's NDP and the government's plans. So what that does, and it is so typically South African, and I need to be anecdotal here because I've been to Ottersdal with the previous minister of when there was a rates boycott. The truth of the matter is that South Africa has good people, well-meaning. We're suspicious of each other. I was sitting in a town meeting with the previous premier, Thandi Modise, where a not young, but a middle-aged Afrikaner person who was working in the municipality who had left for whatever reason, perhaps the environment wasn't good to work there, and stood up and said, but look, I will volunteer to work on Sundays to fix up the water pump. Now, if there is, what do we have if we do a SWOT analysis? We have certain strengths. Our strengths are that South Africa has the ability, we'll bring ourselves to the brink, but we have the ability to work together when it is necessary. Let's take advantage of that. Our weaknesses, we do know that government is suffering from capacity problems. There are governance problems. But on the other side, in the private sector, that can be augmented. So if we try and align and try and develop organizations within the municipality, take advantage of the decreasing lack of trust that we've seen in the last 6, 7, 8 months. Let the business community come forward with all its expertise. I was in government. I can tell you we took decisions in ivory towers, thinking we're going to solve the problems. We didn't know the practical implications of what we were developing. And that practical implication can only come from the private sector.
But can I just intervene here? I've been keenly involved in several of these things. Lately, Maluti Apofung, which is Harrismith and the places around it. The business community are well mobilized. They're doing their part. Kokta is participating, doing their part. Eskom is facilitating because most money is owed to them. Now comes the problem. Your local councillors does not have the political mandate nor the will to come to the party. So unless in the new dispensation, which we will see in a week or so, there is an instruction to participate in these solutions, nothing will happen. So there is a political problem here to get those local councils, and you can put local governments under administration. It's not going to change very much. It's a status.
But Mr. Baba, how do we get how do we get the councillors to engage? Because often you find that when ordinary people start talking, I mean, take the Harry Smith example, when the ordinary ratepayers and the township dwellers start talking and say, we need to get a pump fixed, the farmer says, well, you know, it's like your example you said of the middle-aged Afrikaner saying, well, you know, I will volunteer my services. But how do you force the councillors to be part of the solution?
Well, I just want, there's two dimensions to what I'm saying. The first is that you need people, it's not going to be easy. We have distrust that has been built over years. And particularly in the last 10 years, we've even destroyed the little cohesion we had. So that's where leadership is required, both in the private sector and in the public sector. And trust me, there are leaders and burgeoning and emerging leaders. We can take the initiative. There were times, there's a colleague of mine, Ivor Jenkins, sitting in the audience. He would tell you that against headwinds, we were able to take the business community to meet President Ramaphosa. And he took to the idea with the plans, and we now have plans aligned. If it can be done at a macro level, let's start in one little town and take it from there. But I just want to switch over to something a little more practical as well. The strength in the traditional African communities is their communal existence, where subsistence farming was done. The reason for them remaining at subsistence level is because they did not have access to capital and access to markets. The traditional white community and the established white community had access to markets, enormous skills. And if we understand that we can't live with one another, without one another, and we have, as you have said, it is professor, isn't it?
No. I'm just Peter.
Could I ordain you anyway?
I'll accept that.
What we're saying is that family businesses are closing. There is, I mean, traditional white Afrikaner families, their children are not staying on the farms. But there is an untapped resource in the communal existence of farmers who have the skills to do it, but not necessarily measured meritocracy. But the point is, isn't there a solution there? And again, my friend Ivor would be able to tell you that we found examples in South Africa, in the Free State, where just through efforts and a little bit of leadership, this country, we survived in 1994 because we were able to address our distrust, and we need to do it again.
I will give you an example that I experienced not so long ago. Was in Kenton-on-Sea, where a group of business people, farmers, councillors, they brought the entire community together in a hall one Thursday morning, and everyone from the black business community, entrepreneurs, the mayor was there, the farmers were there, everyone that had a stake in the community, and they all sat and thrashed out how they were going to take the business of the town forward. But for that you need what you were talking about, you need bridge builders. And whose responsibility is that, Requeer? I mean, who in a community, how, you know, when you get that magic happening, where communities in Harry Smith, in Kenton-on-Sea, how does one get that? How does one get the best people in a community to start talking to each other? Do you have any idea on that?
I think it's no easy answer. I think, again, it's a case of these different, perhaps the divided portions of community, getting someone standing up, like the example we had, I'll donate my time. I think those are the people we need. And I think maybe a starting point is to call the community together, like the example you mentioned, just firstly to get the community together, and perhaps in such a forum there will be someone that will stand up and say, this is what I see, or this is my contribution. And that might be easier than hoping someone will just come forward. I think there needs to be a general pulling the community together, getting them just to talk and bridge this, I think, this trust deficit as well, and rebuilding that.
But if I may just add to this and say that there is an incentive for business as well. We all know, I mean, I think you've made the remark, you gave the example of the Jewish family, that the family business in the farming community is dying. Industrial scale is now coming in. But the points that have been made, if we are able to substitute the family scale farming in another form, it may not be a family, but it is local. And that you tap into this, the untapped resource of communal farming as well. Give the markets, access to the markets, access to whatever needs to be required to survive. But 2 points here. One is that when you are able to keep it local, you can incentivize business people that on the short term, yes, industrialization is a quick win. But on the long term, and they are American examples of this, Mr. Archery will be able to tell us, that if you keep it local, there is a downstream effect for local businesses because they buy local. But then you've got to tap the local resource and not take the quick gain of going into industrial scale farming. The second point that I want to raise with you is what saved South Africa in 94 was the faith-based communities. Huge constituencies who are generally well-meaning people.
The churches.
The churches, the faith-based communities. And many of them have become non-racial. This could be the arena to address the social cohesion that's required to improve the political economy.
But can I just add something about the bridge builder? A bridge builder will operate and he will get involved from any of the communities on condition that he can see the end from the beginning. He can see where things are going. Currently, that is missing.
What exactly?
If you get involved in a community, then there must be an incentive for you to get involved. Not a monetary incentive, but an incentive that we can change things. Now, if you don't have a government largely providing you with that idea that if we can change these things, Kokta will come to the party, province will come to the party, some of these things will change. If those things are missing, then even the bridge builders lose confidence and they lose enthusiasm because they can't see the end from the beginning. That's typically their skill, is to look through the problem.
So all we need is a dose of a little bit of populist politics and people will walk away. Mr. Kanyili, you wanted to make a comment?
Yes, two things. I think we need leadership. We have seen what leadership did for us in 1994 when South Africans, black or white, felt that there were players in this project of building the country.
Absolutely.
Black or white. We're beginning to see that we might return to that environment, and I think it needs to be encouraged. But we do need also business leadership or agriculture leadership to emerge. And really, let's begin to get out of these racial stereotypes, the lugers in which we were born and have been functioning all these years. I yearn for the time when I can see a truly non-racial agricultural association that represents farmers across the board, not one specific, and then that can partner with the government.
Absolutely, and you've got a very good example of that. I've got 20 minutes left, and we want to take a few questions from the audience. Leonie, just quick comment from you.
You know, I think most definitely we need a common vision. I think that's what Theo is talking about. A common vision that we can all begin to work towards. And once you have that common vision set, then you come up with an inclusive strategy which brings together everybody in a local space. Because you can see the end, but you come up with a strategy that actually drives us all together. But it's important, right? Because one of the things we have to build as a country as we develop social cohesion is we have to have a set of values against which we are building ourselves. And the values that will develop trust between us, help us to listen to one another so that we can all understand the role we play in that vision and how we're going to get there.
But Lana, just quickly, I mean, the common vision, isn't the common vision simply that we as South Africans, we all want to lead sensible lives?
Well, you can
sensible
lead
and constructive lives.
Absolutely, common vision like that. But that's very broad, right? So you want to have a vision for your particular area. What do you want to see? You want to see in 10 years' time that you have the ability to send your children to school, that you're living in a good home, that whatever happens to you, your family is taken care of. I'm just giving you a very simplistic vision. Now, you can't just put it up very high at a very macro level. You need to get down to the roots of it. The NDP set an amazing vision for us, for our rural spaces of our country. The problem is we've not been able to take that right down to the local level and make it an executable vision that we can all
Because we don't have the leadership that Mr.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we need ethical leadership that can drive us.
Quickly, 30 seconds.
So I think building on strategy is the implementation part. We have great strategies, we need to implement it. And I think the theme is partnership. We need partnership between all these role players. You might have one guy saying, I'll donate my time, but then the other players need to say, yes, we're going to help facilitate what you want to do. And we're going to say, what are we, we're not just all, I'm going to donate time here, there. There's something we're working towards. Without that vision,
it seems that, I mean, it seems the theory, the common view that's coming out is that South Africans are well-intentioned, they want to work together, but we often have a political problem that comes in the way. We take a few questions out of the audience. Here's one here, 1, 2, 3, 4 at the back. Please just say who you are and who you'd like you to direct your question to.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Julian Suter. I'm a graduate at SENVIS, actually. I have two questions for the panel, one for Mr. Baba and one for Mr. Theo, Prof, actually. My first one is based on unemployment and job creation in South Africa. If we look at it, the private and public sector, people are struggling to enter the market, the job industry in that. Don't you think that we could approach commercial farmers, say the farm workers that work for the commercial farmers, get them to training and stuff like that by implementing training programs and get them, because if we look at it, small businesses are the way to go. Because private, if we look at perhaps Standard Bank, for example, closed 91 branches, and that's 1,200 people losing jobs. So what if we get small business owners to develop them and get them in the market to start their own farm perhaps? Maybe start small on a small scale, like 5 hectares or 6 hectares or so. The next point I want to make is on local government. This is directed to Mr. Baba. Do you think that the mandate is not communicated properly of the party down to township level where political leaders are there, don't understand the mandate properly for them to run the, let's say, the township properly in that way? Thank you.
Should we take all the questions or should we just answer those two first? Should we answer them quickly?
Yeah.
Okay. Theo, you go first.
The first question, there's a short answer. I think education and training and vocational training and skills training is non-negotiable. It must happen to a larger scale because it's part of growing the individual. And I hope Nick Serfontein is better now. I heard he had the same flu I had. We call this an election flu. He's a prime example of how to take what he did on his farm, his cattle farm, and then develop a training project based on that. That thing is growing, it's doing well, there's no doubt. Farmers should invest. And we've got the farming CETA, what is it called? I'm not sure it's used well enough.
Mr. Barber?
Yeah, no, Mr. Suter, thanks. The mandate is quite clear. There are two difficulties. The first is, no matter how clear the mandate is, if you don't have the state machinery to carry out that mandate, I'm not going to talk about the integrity of the politician, because I can tell you in the same breath that I know of a number of politicians who are well-meaning, but they don't have the administrative capacity to deliver on their mandate. And that is essentially the problem. And there, largely, the private sector can play a role, provided the politician concerned is mature enough and secure enough to see that this assistance will basically help him or her as well. But I look at 3 or 4 countries at the moment. Politically, it's in a mess. Britain, the US. But the one thing that keeps them surviving is the quality of their administration. And while we are quite fixated on the political side, yes, it does require some kind of attention. If the state machinery is weak, you can deliver nothing, no matter how well intended you are. So that reconfiguration has to take place. But it takes time. What do we do in the meantime? And sorry, I just want to make one suggestion, really. Could you start with 2 or 3 pilot projects? Let's not try and reinvent the world.
Well,
it could, if you get a compliant, and I think the mood is good enough for that right now. We've come through a terrible era where we can approach politicians, but even then, civil society, the power of civil society mustn't be underestimated, regardless of color. Let's find 2 or 3 pilot projects here in the Free State, municipalities. You talk of powers dwindle, powers increase, whatever it is. But the point is, let's try it.
Well, let's find you 2 pilot projects. I can already mention 1 or 2. We will get together after the session, and we'll have a chat. Next question. Jackie.
Hi, I'm Jackie Taylor. I'm from Agritourism Africa, and a lot of research has been done on what I'm going to talk about. But I work on a ground level, and I've got 2 observations, which I'd like the panel to comment on. And one is at a macro level. I don't believe that government should be driving these processes, because for someone like me, I have to meet with 6 different government departments, and that people change all the time. I think this has to be something that farming communities, farmers, and private enterprise or private individuals, or whatever you want to call them, must drive, because it is community-based, and every community is different. So the comments that I have is that let's not rely on government. Rather, let's actually take the initiative as South Africans and as farmers to actually look after those communities. So, for example, in Italy, the rural towns were there only because of farmers. It's the same in South Africa. So farmers have a responsibility to look after those rural towns. So I see more of an entrepreneurial angle to this. And I'd also like to say maybe the skills and the education that we should be getting at these local schools should be more about how do I create my own business? What about entrepreneurship? You know, we can all make a difference, but we all need to do it as South Africans. And I'd just like a comment.
I just wanted to say something that hasn't come out is the social investment that, you know, I saw you were nodding your head there. I think there's a great need to find to align the needs of communities and farmers. We were talking about feeding schemes earlier. You know, where you've got a big problem with early childhood development. Then you've got farmers producing healthy food, like milk farmers. You know, why aren't those needs aligned? The problem is often that the politicians get in the way. Am I correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, all right. Can I just make a general statement here that I think I'm not a free marketeer. I do believe state has to intervene, particularly where socio-economic conditions are bad. We haven't reached that stage of the democracy or development where we can talk about that. But what I think we must, in principle, try and get some kind of arrangement where government, the local government, must create the environment where entrepreneurship can thrive. We don't rely on them for entrepreneurship. And sometimes government doesn't know what is impeding the kind of growth in its area. And that is why engagement is so important. Where are the obstacles? Government people are bureaucrats. They're not business people. It is only when it is brought to their attention. So the first thing that starts is we've got to start addressing the trust deficit.
Sure. But I mean, then you need to be able to get an appointment with a mayor, as Theo was saying.
And sorry, net a last point on that. Then we, or whoever engages with the politicians, must understand that when the kudus are there, it will be the politicians. It won't be the bridge builders.
Absolutely,
or the community.
Absolutely.
You must understand their role. And I think sometimes in some of the communities I don't think guys have enough understanding of the the ego-ness of politicians. If you understand that, you can go a long way.
We can give them all the glory and we can make headway. Leonie wanted to make
no,
a
absolutely. I think it was just about a clear role identification, because I think there's still a role for government to play at this moment in time. But I think increasingly the role and responsibility that's falling on society to do some of the things that are needed to be done is there, because our challenges are very pronounced. And so government's role in creating an enabling environment, looking at your regulatory environment, making it more accessible for entrepreneurship to begin to develop, and then the private sector beginning to work with that, and having been incentivized to work with that, I think we can really build something much stronger in a local space.
Another question?
Johan Besaident from NWK. I think in the last 15 years, my involvement with NWK, I've got enough information to do a PhD on this topic. Maybe I must step in where Francois on Monday night said that we all shareholders of South Africa. And I think there's one thing you will never get, and that's common sense. And I think that's the problem as well. I mean, if you look at, I want to talk firstly about maybe Kulini, where we were involved with South Africa Day. I mean, Dr. Tevi Dominic Tevi did a great job, because we first had to do reconciliation after the big thing that happened in Kulini, and from there on, we involved the community leaders and the businesses. And Francois can tap in as well. We always prepared. I think, I don't want to say agricultural companies are the better ones, but we knew what the communities are all about. If you took the smaller towns, if you took agriculture out of Boerewil, nothing is left. If you look at Lichtenburg, it's a bit better. We've got the biggest cement factories in the world with their factories there. You've got Clover there, you've got Agrico. Every time, and in WK as well and other businesses, every time we saved Lichtenburg from running out of water. We're one of the richest towns in the country, I would believe, of underground water. Since September 2012, sitting without water, 2 days, 2 hours in the morning, 2 days at night. We had a meeting with the local government in the town hall. For the first time, black and white stood up and say, I can't run my guest house without water, electricity. White people, black people as well. I said that night, that's the correct way now. Now black and white are standing together, but nothing has happened. We're having MMs for you will know, Lichtenburg, for most of the 15 years. They can't take responsibility, but they can sign dodgy contracts that I've got copies of. The Voltio Center, when Turkish wasn't involved anymore there was guys that was putting 20 and 30 million on the table to redevelop that. The best thing you can do and get people into the economy is with social, not with ecotourism. Easy way to get everybody involved. But there's not the will and there's not the mutual trust to get the businesses involved in helping them. They haven't got the expertise, they haven't got the capacity. And that's the biggest problem. When we can't let the small towns and dorpies just fall apart and not exist anymore. The other thing is, then you have to look at the sustainability, like the project we did in Kulini. And I mean, the willingness is there from the residents and from the local businesses. So, and the other thing is as well, the big companies, they just leave the towns. We had to fight with APSA as our banker to get the branch of APSA open in Kulini for another 6 months. That closes down. Yeah. So where do they do their banking? If you look at another thing, in the schools, we're heavily involved. I'm getting Tuesday to Skynsdrift. You can go and Google that. That school is without electricity since 2017. It was a former white school. It's a good building. Some of the classes are locked because the ceilings are falling down. So where's the MEC for education? Where's the HODs of education? Do they visit the schools? I'm asking these things because we can't sit back. We've got, everyone in this country has got a responsibility. And as Francois said, we are shareholders. On my way Monday, next to the main road, the raw sewage was already running again there, you know, at the suburb next to the main road. It's unacceptable.
So
thank you.
So I mean, we talk about high-level strategies and plans, and Mr. Kanyili talks about. I mean, we're all well-intentioned. We all want to solve the problem, but I mean, there's Theo saying that they can't get a meeting with the mayor. Here we're hearing from NVK. They want to be involved. They are involved as far as they possibly can, but there's a bottleneck. There simply just is a complete breakdown of governance and intervention. How do we address this? Any ideas? Where does one start?
Well, let me just venture into one example. What Johan said is all true. I mean, the water electricity nexus, especially in Lichtenburg, is a severe problem because if you don't have power, you don't have water. Even a place like Vicksburg is suffering, and of course Harrisburg. But there is another way to approach this problem, and that is to reallocate and to reroute existing funds. Don't look for more money because you're not going to get it. One example of that is what the Defence Force is now doing with their Kulatlatsi project, what they're doing. One of it is the intervention in the Val Triangle. Now, the intervention in the Val Triangle on sewage is going to cost money, but it is also an exercise for the Defence Force to train the reserve forces in doing things that they're supposed to do. It's deploying them and paying them the salaries for which there's a budget already. And then to start with a farming project where they're not farming, but where they use local farmers in conjunction with a mentor farmer to produce food in the province, in the town where the messes are, rather than to centrally buy from Pietermaritzburg or Johannesburg or whatever. So if you have an idea, and if government puts its mind to rescuing the rural areas, they can just reapply and think creatively. And because the excuse if you talk to administrative people and politicians usually is there's no budget. And that is an easy way out. There must be a way to reallocate existing money because use it more productively, especially in the rural areas.
Mr. Baba?
May I make a suggestion? I hear you about allocation. Look, they're going to look at the Division of Revenue Act. They're going to look at reconfiguring. That takes years. Government goes slowly. It's a very slow ship. The question is, what do we do right now?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I can give you horror stories of what you're telling me is what the gentleman spoke about. Is it Lichtenburg? It's a minute problem of what's a much, much bigger problem. The Vaal River came to a head because it had an the consequences were dire. But we can get horror stories, and there were two things I noticed, is the failure of the state machinery, and secondly, the disengagement and cynicism of communities. I mean, I was busy politically campaigning in the last 3-4 months, and I did that about 15 years ago. I was quite shocked at how disengaged communities have become, as if, you know what, ons het nou genoeg gehad. Ons is gaat vol. But that's not the attitude. There are two things that I always say help South Africa, is we have a very active civil society, regardless of color. You gave an example of that town hall. I have a number of examples. Politicians listen, those are votes. They will listen, even if you can't get an appointment. But secondly, it doesn't have to be done aggressively. The example of the tourism, I hope that in the next few weeks, you will see an announcement on visas. But that is as a result of this initiative that was taken by the private sector to go and see the president's office and say this is hurting us. The sectors organize themselves and looked at the inhibitors in their own little sector, which government may not necessarily have been aware of. So you allow them to create an enabling environment. And I plead again, sir, that let's find 1, 2, or 3 pilot projects in this province. The political permutations have changed. Life has changed. Let's move on. And let's see what we can do about it. And let's hope we can come back in a year and say, look, maybe we got something to show you.
Leonie?
Yeah, no, I think obviously, you know, the bureaucratic nature of government administration sometimes takes the stories like what you are raising very long for them to actually deal with it. And I think communities and people in those areas cannot wait for that machinery to turn. And I think for me, you know, we keep talking about the capacity of local government. I think we've been investing very largely in capacity at national level. I think Theo is absolutely right. We are not investing sufficiently in the capacity at local level. So even when a decision has to be made, you know, you don't want 10 people to go and ask everyone else, why is the sewage flowing down my road? You know, there should be able to be someone who within the next 24 hours should be able to have the power and capability to make those decisions and that authority, and it's not happening. That is the absolute truth. So I think that we still have a lot that we have to do together.
But you said it. We don't have the time. We're 28 years down the line. We don't have the time to wait for capacity at local government level. The issue is, how do we start now using the resources that we have? There we've got Mr. Vusikanyile in Amersfoort. He runs one of the major financial services business. I mean, that's an asset that the community has. How do we leverage those assets? Mr. Kanyile, what would you suggest in Amersfoort? How does one get the community together in a sensible way that one can reconfigure it in such a way that everyone benefits?
Well, I must admit also that coming into the sector without the experience has really forced us to focus on the micro. Let's get to this thing to be successful. Let's know what we are doing. But we cannot succeed unless the town plays its role. We can't take our crop to the market if the local roads are non-functional. So therefore, I think we've got the opportunity to reboot the relationships between the farmers and the government. I really, really believe that. And I think we just need to move forward and have faith that once a new government is in place, that if the farmers come forward, let the farmers take the lead. Let's go and meet the mayor afterwards. Let's discuss the issues with them. Let's meet with the people who are doing, is it monitoring and evaluation of government performance. Let's share with them where we think the system is actually failing us.
Absolutely, and I think just to come in, because I think you actually almost have to create new platforms of engagement that happen at that localized level. So they become your hotline to what's happening in a community. Not relying on conventional mechanisms, that's not going to help us. Innovative solutions with community and government working with each other. It's better if you know the engineering technician in a local municipality, then you're always thinking you're going to be able to knock on the door of the mayor. And I think those are the kind of platforms where we start working with each other that are going to help us.
Requir?
Yeah, I think the key theme is partnerships. Like what you just said, we're going to need, we're now at this point, we need to work together. We can't go our separate ways in trying to solve it. We need the partnerships and everyone to come together.
But isn't there a role for organised agriculture? I mean, Mr. Kanyile is a farmer. He's farming. I mean, who does that? Does Mr. Kanyile go and speak to the mayor? I mean, who facilitates this process?
Oh, well, bridge builders are from all sectors of society.
Exactly.
They're not necessarily a dominee or a CEO or a this or a that. They usually informal leaders that establishes their own legitimacy among communities that are not necessarily talking. They need two things. They need this idea of where are we going to energize them, and then they need a sense of urgency. There must be some form of crisis that must be resolved.
But where does Johan get an informal leader? I mean, they've got an issue now. They need their water problem sorted out. What is the advice you give to?
Their problem, and I know the Lichtenburg problem very well, their problem are basically two things. One is a dysfunctionality in the provincial, and remember the province, Northwest, is also under administration. So that's the kind of South African paradox. A province under administration has recently put a local government under administration. You can't believe that, but that's what's happening. But so the one problem is that, and the second problem is factions within the ruling party. And the factions within the ruling party at the local level causes a paralysis in decision making. Nobody wants to move, because if you move, if you sign a document, the other side will take you out and you're gone. So there's an absolute paralysis, and the sense of urgency, I think, we've got, because within 2 years, less than 2 years, there are going to be local government elections. Now that's the urgency you need to get things rolling.
So we're back to the politics. Do we have time for one more question?
Sorry, we couldn't hear you.
Speak a bit louder.
My name is Kelo. I'm an entrepreneur based in Johannesburg. When I hear trust deficit, I'm sorry, but I hear corruption. Since '94, I think for me, what the ANC government has done is use government to siphon money out of all of us. And after 25 years, I have. So my questions are really to Mr. Benta. Is there a model where all these municipalities that are not working can be closed down? If they were businesses, they would be liquidated. Why do we keep them alive? And secondly, what I haven't heard today is led before. These small towns, this is where most farmers are. We have, I think it's an elephant in the room, most of them are farmers, but not a single person talked about the impending land reform processes. How can that be used to revitalize small cities?
Should we just, any chance of closing down the municipalities, Mr. Barber? Could we get a white paper out on that?
It's constitutionally given, and all of these towns, including Lichtenburg and Harry Smith and the Van der Bijlpark Vereniging guys, there are several that went to court. The moment you're in court, the judges are confronted with a constitutional ruling that there's 3 tiers of government: national, provincial, and local. Even if businessmen argue that we can run the town better, you can't get over that. There's an elective proportion at local government. But I think the solution lies in creating a 4th level of government. The normal 3, metros, towns, and whatever. But we need to classify about, I would guess, 200 local governments. And I don't have a good English word, but in Afrikaans I would have referred to them as hulpbehoevende stadsraden. City councils that are, or town councils that are being semi-governed and financed by government, because they just don't have the financial base to be sustainable.
Okay, well, it's just one last question there, because I see you've been trying to ask this question for a while.
I actually felt compelled by the lady just stood up when she said the elephant is in the room. I'm Kaya Katu, a citrus farmer in the Eastern Cape. I just want to give this contribution to the panel as well. On my farm, what I did, I gave the workers 20%. I formed a workers' trust. That workers' trust is the one that is owning the 20%. And for the permanent workers to be part of that workers' trust, they have to work a year before they get into that workers' trust. That has helped us a lot as a result now. Our workers, they don't borrow loans anymore because the farm sustains them. And they work harder than what they used to do before because they are part owners of the farm. And also we've got an external auditor that is making sure that what we said we're giving the workers as 20%, it is 20%. It's not on paper. Every time we declare the shares, they form part of the board as well. So that can be helpful from the farmer's side in terms of looking at these models. These models, they really work. I know it's not one size fits all. It differs from each farmer. So I think this is one of solutions going forward. Thank you very much.
Mr. Kanyili, did you want to comment quickly?
I would fully endorse that approach. It's part of sharing the benefits of success and forming the partnership between the farm owner and the workers who actually make the farm succeed.
Leanne, quick closing comment?
Absolutely. I think that the land reform issue is an issue that we all have to look at and understand that it provides many opportunities for us as well to actually look at how we can deal collectively with the injustices of the past. And there are many innovative models where we can work with each other. And I think it can contribute to a very sustainable agricultural sector if we are able to come up with those innovative models of working, where there are many already existing in this country. Let's follow some of those best practice models, and land reform can surely work for all of us.
Thank you very much. I think that brings us to the end of our panel discussion. I think we could have spoken for another hour or two about this. I think the one blockage is the political angle on it. I'm not quite sure how it's going to get around that. I think building bridges is the only way. I think it's incumbent on everyone in every community to find those people in the community who can lead and to enable them to take the exercise further. We want to thank you for joining us. Please enjoy the rest of NAMPO and drive safely back home. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Nation in Conversation, in proud partnership with Senves, Bayer, Engen, Nedbank, AFGRI, Grain SA and John Deere, in association with Hinterland and Isuzu.